If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up to Philippians chapter 4. So when we got back into Philippians, we spent, I think it was 3 verses the first week, and then 4 verses last week. So that means what for this week? 2. I tricked you. Yeah, sorry about that. I knew what I was doing. We talked about some trees a couple of weeks ago. We're going to talk about trees again. I am not an arborist. I think that's the correct term. I do think trees are cool. But this one here, have you ever seen a tree that actually leans over? Look at that. So the picture's not the best maybe, but it was hard to find a good picture of these. These are actually trees that are on the coast, the southern coast of New Zealand. And as I found this tree and I was looking at it, I was like, man, I got to go to New Zealand someday. But it's like an 18-hour flight, so I don't know if that's good or bad. But these trees are on the coast, and many people call these flag trees. Okay? In New Zealand, they call them flag trees. And these trees are exposed constantly to strong winds, year after year after year. And what's fascinating about these trees is that they don't break. Instead, over time, because of the constant pressures, the wind slowly shapes them, slowly helps them, and the wind blows them to where it looks like they're constantly being blown in one direction. As a matter of fact, in this, you can actually tell the direction the wind is going by the way the trees are leaning. So in this picture, the wind would be coming from the left of the picture toward the right. And you can tell that by how these trees are leaning. And so the wind becomes visible in the shape of these trees. Nobody looks at these trees and wonders, wow, did that happen overnight? Like, what? I didn't notice that yesterday. Nobody looks at it and goes, oh, that happened overnight. Because it didn't happen overnight. This happens by thousands and thousands of days of constant wind and constant influence on these trees. And whether we realize it or not, the same thing happens in our minds. Our lives are rarely shaped by one conversation or one social media post or one television show or one news report. We are shaped by what we constantly allow into our minds. The thoughts that we dwell on, the voices that we listen to, the influences that we welcome, and over time, they begin to shape how we think, how we feel, how we respond, and whether we experience peace or not. Which is exactly why Paul writes these words in Philippians 4, 8, and 9, because Paul understood a truth that we often forget. What fills our minds will eventually shape our lives. And so today we're going to discover a peace that grows when our minds are focused on the true, what's true and godly. Because the prevailing thoughts in your life will eventually shape you. And so look at Philippians chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. We're going to read this together. Most of you know this verse. It says this: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. 2 verses full of all kinds of great information, great things. And that brings us to our big idea for this morning. It's in your bulletin. It's on the screen right now. Peace grows when our minds are focused on what is true and godly. Peace grows when our minds are focused on what's true and godly. And so last week we did 4 points in our sermon, which we don't normally do. So to make it up, we only have 2 today. All right? So, I like to keep it even for you guys. So here's our first point for this morning. Focus your mind on what is true. When we just looked at Philippians 4:8, we looked at verse 8, and it says this: "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such thing." Paul now moves from prayer and peace that we read about in verses 4 through 7 to the battlefield of the mind. And he does it in 2 parts. What we focus on with our mind, and then what we practice. And so verse 8 is the part of focusing with our minds, and then verse 9 is, how do you practice it? And so this is not a do not do list. How many times did you get a do not do list when you were growing up? Right? You go out to play. Don't play in the street. Okay, fine. Stove's on. Don't touch the stove. How many of us touched it anyway? Yeah, probably most of us, yeah. Certain things you just got to learn on your own. You get your driver's license. Don't speed. All right, this isn't me telling you my sins, okay? But we get the do not do list in a lot of places. But this is not a do not do list. This is a do list. Do think about what is true. Do think about what is noble. Do focus on what is right and what is pure and lovely and admirable. And do think about the things that are excellent and praiseworthy. He tells us in this verse what to pursue. Because the Christian life is not about just removing bad thoughts or bad habits. It's about replacing them with better ones. And Paul also calls us to be deliberate about where our attention is. He tells us to think about these things, to dwell on, to consider, and to continually bring them before our mind. Have you ever noticed that when you allow your attention to just go away, what you end up doing? How many of us, this isn't a raise your hand question, okay? Just how many of us, when we're in the middle of just doing nothing, instead of sitting and being bored, we pull out our phones and we start scrolling? Now, I know some of us don't do that, and that's great. But my guess is if you're not scrolling on your phone, there might be something else you're doing to fill that time. And so we need to make sure that our attention is where it's deliberate, that we're deliberately taking those thoughts captive. Because what receives your attention eventually shapes your direction. The wind that shaped those trees didn't do it overnight. It was not a dramatic single-day event. The shaping happened through constant exposure. And the same thing is true spiritually. Your mind is being shaped every single day by what you are constantly exposing yourself to. So what are the prevailing winds in your life? What are the things you're allowing to shape your each and every day? I'm not sure there's a time in history where we have more things trying to grab our attention. I'm not sure any time in history there have been more things trying to get our attention every single day. Think about the media and entertainment industry that we have, to where even commercials are so pinpoint. There are psychological studies done about commercials to make sure they grab your attention. This frustrates me to no end because I like watching things like NASCAR on Sundays after church. And I go home and I'll watch the race, and there'll be a commercial break. And what they do is they take the screen and they make the NASCAR race real small, right? And then they make the commercial over here real big. And where do your eyes go every time? The stinking commercials. But I'm like, no, the race is over here. I want to watch that. But because of the psychological aspect of it, they pull you in. There are so many things vying for our attention. What about social media? Some people in this room right now will post something today and they will check it 100 times to see how many posts, likes it got. What's vying for your attention? Maybe it's the news. You keep Fox News or CNN on your TV 24 hours, 7 days a week. And all you can think about is what's the next talking head going to talk about? Whether Trump is right or Trump is wrong, or the Democrats are right or the Democrats are wrong, or whatever it might be. And you're allowing this media and this stuff to take your attention, and God's saying the longer we focus on those things, the more you start to bend like those trees. And then we get led down a negative path. And our lives look different. And we live in this state where we just feel this constant outrage because of what's changed in our minds. And then we become endlessly negative. And then we start doing comparisons between us and others. And a bitterness can sometimes take hold. And then even impurities. Not everything entering your mind is actually helping your soul. And you can tell by the fruit that's produced in a life. You cannot fill your mind with trash all week and not expect your spiritual life to not smell. Romans 12:2 says this, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." So many times we go back to that verse just for 1 minute. So many times during this verse we go to be transformed by the renewing of your mind, but we forget the first part. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. If you look like the world, you need to ask yourself if Jesus is truly the Lord of your life. Because it's only through removing ourselves from that pattern can we truly allow Jesus to transform our minds. Many Christians want peace. They want to experience the peace, but they constantly and continually feed anxiety into their lives. And they want confidence, but they are constantly consumed with fear. And most Christians want hope, but they continually meditate on discouragement. Peace only grows when truth is cultivated in our lives. But like I said earlier, Paul tells us right now what to focus our minds on. And now he's going to move to telling us what to practice. And that's the second part for us today. Practice what God has shown you. Practice what God has shown you. Look at Philippians 4:9. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. You see, Paul moves from this idea of what we're doing or what we're thinking to now what we're doing, from the mind to life. Notice what he says here. He says, he's saying, look at what you've heard me say. Look at what you received from me. Look at what you've seen in me, and put it into practice. He says, look at what you've learned, what you've received, what you've heard, and what you've seen. And the Philippians have been given this truth. Paul has shown it to them Others have modeled it for them in their lives, and now they are responsible for living it. The same is for us. We have so many people in our lives. My guess is you could give me a handful of people in your life that have modeled what it looks like to truly be a believer. And you could point them out. You could tell me their names right now. We have people in our minds, but now it's our job. It's our job to truly live it. When I was in student ministry, people often ask me, like, what are your goals in student ministry? And, I had some pretty basic goals, like, not hurting children by whatever game we were doing. We did one time where, Matthew, I'm not telling you to do this, okay? We did one time where we had 2 liters of Sprite, and you had a teammate, and you had to drink the entire 2 liter as fast as you could. I don't have to tell you what happened after that, do I? If you don't know, ask me later. Maybe we'll do that in the next elders meeting. Sound good? Only if I video it, yeah. No, I would. That would be for sure. But my goal with students was to help them make their faith their own. Because many of the students that I worked with had parents that were committed Christians. People that were really good at modeling who Jesus was in their lives. But until those kids made that faith their own, it wasn't real to them. And I think it's important for us to understand that even as adults, we have to spend daily trying to make that faith our own, because we are responsible for living it. And why is this important? Because spiritual maturity is not measured by what you know. It's measured by what you obey. You can know a lot of things in your life and do nothing with it. And that is actually probably one of the biggest themes in all of the book of Philippians. Paul keeps calling believers to think rightly, to follow faithfully, to live for your true citizenship, to stand firm in unity, to pray instead of panic, and now put it into practice. If you think about it, when you go to the doctor, he can make up a good plan for you. He could set a great plan for your health and give you the right treatment. A physical therapist can give perfect instructions on what to do, and a trainer can design the perfect workout. But none of it helps if you don't actually put it into practice. Knowledge alone doesn't produce change. Application does. Look at this verse in James chapter 1, verse 22. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. He is telling us that if we listen to the word and it doesn't change our hearts, it doesn't change our minds, then we're deceiving ourselves. And what I think he means by that is so many of us can go to the Bible, or maybe we show up on Sunday morning and we're like, man, I'm a good Christian. I know the Bible and I go to church, so I'm a good Christian. But if it doesn't change how you live, you're deceiving yourself. Paul ends with this verse in verse 9, and he says, this peace of God is with you at the end of that verse. May the peace of God be with you. Notice the progression there. In verse 7, we had the peace of God guards us. And now in verse 9, the peace of God is with us. Paul understands that our minds are under constant attack. Fear wants your attention. Worry wants your attention. Anxiety wants your attention. But instead of letting those things dominate your thinking, Paul calls us to fill our minds with what is true and godly, and then put it into practice. Because what fills your mind will eventually shape your life. Look at these trees again. These trees didn't wake up one morning shaped by the wind. They were shaped by years of exposure. And your life is being shaped as well. The question is not whether your mind is being influenced. The question is, what is influencing it? What fills your mind will shape your peace. And peace grows when our minds are focused on what is true and godly. And that brings us back to our big idea for this morning. Peace grows when our minds are focused on what is true and godly. So the question this morning needs to be this. What is influencing you? What have become the loudest voices in your life? Is it fear, anger, negativity, political outrage, social media, comparison, anxiety? What are the prevailing winds that are shaping your mind? Because what fills your mind will eventually shape your life. And Paul calls us to something better. He calls us to intentionally fill our minds with what is true, what is noble and right and pure and lovely and admirable and praiseworthy. Then he says, put it into practice. Not just know it, not just agree with it, but live it out. And maybe for some of you today, the Holy Spirit has put his finger on something you've been allowing into your mind that is pulling your heart away from God. Maybe the invitation today is to stop feeding that influence and start feeding your soul with truth. Maybe some of you here today, God has already shown you what obedience looks like. And so for you, the issue isn't knowledge. The issue is action. You know what God's calling you to do, and now it's time for you to put it into practice. And for some of you, the first step isn't changing what fills your mind. The first step is surrendering your life, your heart, and your mind to Jesus Christ. Because lasting peace is not found in positive thinking. It is found in a relationship with the Prince of Peace. And so today, as we come to this time of invitation, if you've never trusted Christ, he invites you to come to him today, to repent, to be forgiven, to be made new, to find the peace that only he can give. Peace grows when our minds are focused on what is true and godly. So what's going to shape your mind this week? And what kind of person will those influences shape you into becoming? If you have a decision to make today, during this next song, I pray you make it. Why don't you stand with us as we sing?